All right, how do I know God's will? Well, I'm going to start by just going through a bunch of things in the Bible, like the Old Testament and the different ways that God spoke to people to kind of give them direction, and then just see the variety that He has and things that He did, and then what's more common today. So, when the Israelites left Egypt, they started a whole new thing, and so the country as a whole, they had high priests, and the high priest was there to give, to speak to God and then pass it on to the people. They had a breastplate that had 12 gems in it, and it had two little things called the Urim and the Thummim, which were basically dice. And so they would say, well, God, what do we do about this? And if you want us to do this, have the dice show up to be this. If you want this, have the dice this. And so the high priest would go to God and ask Him, and that's what they would do. That continued even into the book of Acts in the New Testament. So after Jesus went back to heaven, the apostles were like, wow, there were 12 apostles, and Jesus told 12, so Judas wouldn't kill himself, and so we should probably replace and get someone else here. And so they went through, they kind of narrowed down the selection process, and then they cast lots to pick, they ended up picking Matthias, I believe, in the book of Acts, in Acts 1. So even up to that point, people use that. Signs. There's a lot of places in the Bible where God gave signs. Probably the most interesting one is Gideon. God showed up to Gideon and said, hey, I want you to go do this. And Gideon's like, are you sure about that? And he's like, all right, well, if this is God and you really want me to do this, and it's just not, me thinking weird thoughts, I'm going to take a piece of fleece. I'm going to put it out on the ground, and if it's wet and the ground around it's dry, then I know it's you, God, and we'll be good to go. So puts it out there. Next morning goes out. The fleece is wet, the ground is dry, and Gideon was like, yeah, but, the morning dew would have gone into the fleece and soaked it all up, and then in the morning, the ground would have dried. So, I feel like that's just a natural happenstance. So, tell you what, God, I'll follow you and I'll do your thing, but first, let's put the fleece out, and if it's dry in the morning and the ground is wet, then I really know it's you. So gets up the next morning, sure enough, fleece is dry, the ground is wet. So Gideon's like, all right, I guess I'll go do the thing. And I believe it was, God had told him to go and chop down the idol, the Asherah pole that was in the town. And so Gideon went with some friends at night and chopped it down. So there's brave Gideon for you in the Bible. There's another one, circumstances. The Apostle Paul was starting churches, and he was writing to the church at Corinth, and he says that God has opened a great door for me to do good work, and so I need to go do that. So just the door just means an opportunity that came up, circumstances that were ideal for him to go and do that. Direct intervention of God. Luke 9:35. Okay, so Jesus took Peter, James, and John up on a mountain toward the end of his ministry, went up there, and then the word is transfigured. He showed his God glory to them. And Peter, James, and John were like, wow, they were just, stunned. And Peter, just overwhelmed, starts talking, because that's what he does. And Peter says, God, this is awesome. Let's just stay up here on this mountain. We'll build some little huts. We'll hang out here and just be here. And God speaks from heaven and says, this is my son. Listen to him. Peter, shut up. Stop talking. You're not getting the big picture here. Just listen. And so it's one of the times, I think it's one of like 3 different times that God physically spoke when Jesus was on the earth. So the direct intervention of God. The Spirit prevented them. Again, Paul was around starting churches, and he gets to this place in Europe, and he wants to go north, and it says the Spirit prevented him. Now, that's not a lot of detail. I don't know exactly what that means. If there was like a force field that was there, and they just couldn't go past it, if they just were overwhelmed with some type of emotion or feeling, or the Spirit spoke, I don't know. It doesn't really say. It just says the Spirit prevented them from going north, and then so they went somewhere else, because then when the Spirit prevented them from going that way, Paul had a vision at night. And the vision was this man from over here in Macedonia that said, "Hey, Paul, come help us." And I love how understated the Bible is. So in the morning, Paul was sharing his dream, and then it says something to the effect of, "We determined that God wanted us to go to Macedonia." So the Spirit prevented, Paul had a dream, and we figured, maybe we should go that way. So that's what they did. They went that way. So this is just a highlight. It's showing some of the variety. God almost never uses the same way to get people's attention, the same way to talk to them in the Old Testament. It's almost never the same. He's a God of creativity. He's a God that works in the individual people's lives. And what may motivate you is going to be different than what may motivate you. And so God uses different things. These are kind of more situational a lot of times. And so, but it's just to show you that God has continually been speaking. Today, how do I know God's will for my life? Well, first of all, the Word of God. Psalm 119, 105 says, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." So when we read God's Word, it shines the next few steps, what we need to do. And so the issue is when people say, well, just what's the Bible say? What do we mean by that? Well, in the Bible, you have commands. You have black and whites that God says, do this, don't do that. And so there are people that, and I know a guy that he was convinced that he was having an affair, and he was convinced that God wanted him to leave his wife and go be with this other woman. And that's definitely one of those places that it's a command of, no, God didn't want that. If you ever have some thought and you're trying to figure out, is this God's will, and it's in direct contradiction to something in the Bible, you know it's wrong. You know it's not God leading you to that. So there are definitely commands, then there's principles. There's basic principles of, because the Bible can't cover every circumstance. You know, should I buy this car, or should I move to this town? The Bible doesn't say, no, don't move to Ohio. That'd be bad, okay? But God gives you principles in there about to help you sort through those things. And then there's Bible stories, Bible characters, people that God has worked with in the past. I like this a lot because I like being in a similar situation to someone in the Bible and then going, well, okay, so how did God work with that person? What did he do with them, and what did that person do? And I like using that because there's just certain situations there's not a lot of direct commands for, so it helps give guidance, and it helps you also go, I'm not the only one that's had to deal with something like this. So when people say, read the Bible to see God's will, this helps a lot. Now, can you say, God, I really need an answer, and you just flip open a page? Yes, you can do that. God could do that, but there's a lot of weird stuff that happens if you just pull random verses, okay? One of the most famous is to say, Um, God, whatever I wrote the Bible to, I'm going to do that. So you open it up and you go, Judas killed himself. Oh, wow, that's okay. And then you open somewhere else. Go and do likewise. Well, I mean, you know, so if you just pull random verses, it's not going to be helpful. You really need to look through those things. Knowing God. Jesus said, I'm no longer going to call you my servants, I'm going to call you my friends. And a friend knows what their friend likes and what their friend doesn't like. I like comparing to a relationship with my kids. In our home, when the kids were growing up, we had certain rules that went across the board. Okay, we're going to act like this in public. We're not going to do this. We're not going to throw temper tantrums in the restaurant. You know, those type of things. Those were across the board. But I also treated my kids different. With Bryson, I would have him jump on my stomach, and I would throw him around. I didn't throw Chloe around a lot of places because they're different. And the same thing was true with our relationship with God. The more that we know him, the more that we understand who he is and what he wants, the more we want to please him. The more we want to act with him in a way that he wants us to. So knowing God, the more we know him, the more we're going to understand what his will would be. Does God just want me to walk on past all these people that are in need? Yeah, probably not, because we see Jesus stopping so many times to help people, even when he had a busy schedule. Renewing your mind. Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so the renewing of your mind is realigning the way that you look at life based on the fact that God is there, he's living, he's active, he wants to be involved in your life. And so when you start thinking that way, instead of just going to church, sitting there for an hour a week and going, yeah, that was something nice, you start saying, I think this God is real. I think he does want to be involved in my life, and so let me get involved in the things that he cares about. Let me start looking at the world through his lens on what I do with my money, on what I do with my time, and the attitude that I have toward people. And start looking that way. That's renewing your mind to have a biblical mindset instead of just doing whatever everybody else is doing. It takes time, but when you continue to put yourself in places and positions where you can be influenced by God and you see who God is and what he wants, the more it's going to happen. How do we know God's will? The Spirit's voice. Sometimes called, the Spirit just kind of nudging you. There's a cool story about Elijah. He had just gone and had this big showdown with all these prophets. And then he just went, he got depressed. And God said, okay, here, I'm going to take you, get something to eat, take a nap. I'm going to take you over here. And out here, I'm going to put you in this cave. And I just want you to kind of watch. And then there's this big firestorm that comes on the mountain, but God wasn't in the firestorm. There's a big earthquake that comes up against the mountain, but God wasn't in the earthquake. And then there's a still small voice, and that's God's small voice talking to Elijah, saying, and then having the conversation. And the comparison to us today is we live in a society where there's constantly noise. There's TV, there's our phones, there's people that we're around, and it's really hard to sit and listen to God with all that competing noise. And so we take some time to be alone with God and learn to distinguish between our own thoughts and then God's thoughts inside of us. A lot of times God's Spirit, the little nudge, a lot of times those are not convenient nudges. A lot of time God says, okay, I just want you to do this. Go do this. And you're like, I don't know that I really want to do that. I was on my way to work a month or two ago, and I see this car with its blinkers on and this kid pushing the car. And I'm like, And I felt that nudge to stop and help. And I'm like, yeah, no. And so I went past. It's morning traffic. There's people behind me. I'm in my good clothes. I'm just like, no. And I'm like, so I went and did a U-turn, came behind him, parked my car, threw my flashers on, went and helped him push him, I don't know, 150 yards up around the corner to the first safe place. And then I tried to walk back. I mean, he may have said thank you, but there wasn't hardly anything there. And then I have to walk back to my car that's parked in the middle of rush hour traffic. And my thighs are just burning. I mean, I can't barely walk. I'm just looking like an idiot, stumbling back to my car. Did anything happen because of that? I don't know. Was I obedient to what I felt like God was nudging me to do? I was. Not happy. I was griping the whole time, but I did it anyway. Okay? God's nudges a lot of times, most of the times, are not convenient on our timing. But when you look through the Bible and the encounters that Jesus had, there's plenty of times where Jesus is doing some ministry here and someone interrupts him. And in the middle of whatever he's doing, he takes the time to notice that person and do what he needs to do with them. And we don't always see the results, but our responsibility is not the results. Our responsibility is the obedience. So, and then peace. Galatians 5:22 says the fruit of the Spirit, the outgrowth of the Spirit in our lives. One of the outgrowth is peace, a settledness. You know, when you're trying to make a decision about this or that, and you're like, man, I don't know. Should I take this job or that job? I don't know. Should I marry this person or that person? It's hard. And then you go through, you think through it, you pray about it, and if you choose this one, you're just not settled. It just still feels not good. When you choose this one, there's just a peace, a lack of anxiousness that overflows you, and you just become settled and go, you know what? It follows God's commands, His principles. I don't know, but it just feels right to choose this one. The couple times that I've looked for a job when I was a pastor, I'm like, God, I'm not smart enough to figure out all the different choices out there. So I just need you to make it incredibly obvious for me. And so for me, it was, okay, this one said no, this one said no, this one said no. There's only one place left. Okay, apparently that's the one. And then having peace to be settled, you know what? It's not just that it's the last one, but it's also there's that peace that goes with it. And so, how do I know God's will? It's never going to break God's command. Okay? God can speak to you in a variety of ways, but the better you know Him, the more you're changing and growing and maturing, the more obvious some things are going to be. And then when you're looking for very specific things, learn to distinguish between that nudge that's kind of outside of you and your own thoughts, and just get to a place where you can be settled.